All right, ready for a deep dive?
Always. What are we diving into today?
You suggested this one, right? Sand.
That's right. I'm excited to dig into this one.
Dig into this one. I see what you did there.
Had to sneak one in.
So, sand. Honestly, when I first saw this suggestion, I was like, really? Sand? But the more I thought about it, the more I was like, okay, there's got to be something here.
There really is. I mean, it's
Mhm.
everywhere, but we never really think about it, do we?
Exactly. Okay, so where do we even start with sand? There's just so much of it.
Well, we're going to start with something that seems totally unrelated, but is actually completely dependent on sand.
Yeah.
Artificial intelligence.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, get ready for this.
Yeah.
Those smartphones we're all glued to, those self-driving cars everyone's talking about, none of that would exist without sand.
Now you've got to explain that one. How does sand become a self-driving car?
It all starts with silicon.
Silicon. Like what's in my computer chips?
You got it. Silicon comes from silica, which just so happens to be the most abundant component of sand.
So let me get this straight. Those tiny little computer chips, CPUs, GPUs, all that, they're made from sand.
Essentially, yes. And the reason silicon is so important is because it's what we call a semiconductor. It can control the flow of electricity in a very precise way.
Okay, I think I'm following. But how does that make it essential for AI?
Think of it this way. Silicon chips are like tiny little brains that power our computers and smartphones. And just like our brains need information to learn and make decisions, AI algorithms need massive amounts of data to do their thing.
Ah, so the silicon chips provide the processing power that AI needs to crunch all that data.
Exactly. They're the engines that make the whole AI revolution possible.
Mind
Yeah.
blown. You're telling me this entire AI revolution, all this incredible technology, it all traces back to sand.
It does. It's like
Uh,
data is to AI what sand is to microchips, the essential building block. And actually, one of the articles you sent me called Beta the New Sand, which I thought was really interesting.
Data as the new sand? Wow. Okay, we're already getting ahead of ourselves. So we've got the silicon, the chips, the processing power, the data. What kind of AI are we talking about here? Like the self-driving car AI, the AI assistant that everyone and their mother seems to be using these days.
All of that and more. We're talking machine learning, deep learning, all the really complex stuff. And none of it would be possible without those powerful silicon chips, which, as we now know, come from the sand beneath our feet.
This is blowing my mind. I never would have thought.
That sand is the unsung hero of the AI revolution.
Seriously, so we've gone from sand on the beach to like the metaverse and robots and all this crazy AI stuff. Who knew?
That's pretty wild, right? This tiny little thing, sand, it's like the secret ingredient in our digital world.
Totally. But you know what else is wild? Sand has a spiritual side too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's not just about technology. Sand has been significant in spiritual traditions for like centuries.
Exactly. And we're not just talking about one religion here. It seems like sand pops up everywhere, like this common thread across different cultures and beliefs.
That's a great observation. For example, in Christianity, there's that famous parable Jesus tells about the wise man who built his house on rock and the foolish man who built his on sand.
Yeah, the whole house built on sand thing, everyone knows that one, right?
Right. It's a really powerful metaphor. Jesus was trying to get across this idea of a strong foundation being essential for weathering the storms of life.
Because if you build on sand, the first sign of trouble.
It all comes crashing down.
Oof, yeah, not a good look. But you know, it's funny because sand also represents something totally different in the Bible. Abundance.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like when God promises Abraham descendants as numerous as the grains of sand on the seashore.
Right, you can't even count that high. There's just so much sand. It's almost like a symbol of infinity, you know?
Exactly. So we see sand representing both instability and abundance. It's fascinating how a single material can hold such opposite meanings.
It really is. Okay, so we've got the Christian perspective, but what about other religions? Does sand have any significance in, say, Islam?
It definitely does. In Islam, sand takes on both practical and symbolic meanings. Like one really interesting example is the ritual of tayammum.
Tayammum, say that again?
Tayammum. It's a ritual purification that uses clean sand or dust instead of water.
Wait, really? You can do that?
Yep. It's often practiced in desert cultures where water is scarce.
Wow, that's amazing. So even when it comes to something as vital as water, sand can provide an alternative.
And it's not just about practicality either. In Islamic art and architecture, you see these intricate geometric patterns, right? A lot of them are inspired by the seemingly infinite nature of sand grains, which ties into the idea of God's boundless nature.
Wow, I never knew that. It's incredible how these little grains of sand can hold such deep spiritual meaning.
It is pretty incredible.
But as much as we love to talk about the spiritual and symbolic side of things, we can't ignore the fact that there's a very real sand problem happening right now.
You're right, we can't avoid the elephant in the room, or should I say, the dwindling sand dune in the desert. The global sand crisis is a serious issue.
Okay, so let's talk about that. What exactly is the sand crisis?
Well, basically, we're using sand at an unsustainable rate. We're talking massive amounts of sand, mainly for construction.
Construction. I mean, I know they use sand for concrete and stuff, but is it really that bad?
It's worse than you might think. We're talking about dredging rivers, mining beaches, even scooping up sand from the ocean floor, all to keep up with our demand for concrete, asphalt, glass, all that stuff.
And what are the consequences of all that?
It's pretty grim. Ecologically, we're talking habitat destruction, erosion, sea turtles losing nesting grounds. It's not good.
This is what I was saying before. It's like we were so focused on the amazing things about sand that we forgot to consider the not so amazing.
Definitely a wake-up call.
It is, isn't it? I mean, we started out talking about AI and ended up talking about like sea turtles losing their homes. It's all connected, huh?
It really is. It just goes to show sand, this one tiny little thing, it's connected to so much. Our technology, our beliefs, our planet. It's kind of mind-blowing when you really think about it.
Totally. But okay, so now that we're all sufficiently mind blown, what do? We can't just like stop using sand, can we?
No, we can't. But we can certainly start using it more responsibly. We need to find a more sustainable path forward.
Easier said than done, though, right? I mean, what does that even look like?
Well, for one thing, we need to get serious about exploring alternative building materials.
Like what?
There's been some really promising research into things like recycled plastic, bamboo, even hemp.
Hemp houses. Now that's something I'd like to see.
Right. It's about thinking outside the box. Or maybe I should say, outside the sandbox.
I like it. But I'm guessing it takes more than just hemp houses to solve a global crisis, right?
You're right. It's going to take a multi-pronged approach. We need stricter regulations on sand mining. And just as importantly, we need to make sure those regulations are actually enforced.
Yeah, that makes sense. What else?
We also need to invest in restoring the ecosystems that have already been damaged by sand mining. It's not just about taking, it's about giving back, you know?
Right. Finding that balance. So as we wrap things up here, what's the one thing you really want our listeners to take away from this deep dive into the world of sand?
I guess I'd say this. Next time you see a grain of sand, don't just brush it off your shoulder. Take a second to really look at it. Think about everything it represents, everything it connects to.
Because that tiny grain of sand, it's a part of something much bigger than all of us.
Exactly.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say this might be our most profound deep dive yet.
I'd have to agree.
Until next time, everyone, keep those brains buzzing. And remember, everything is connected.